Hey, it's Andy with Figment, and we're here today with Layne and Mickey from Flow to talk about Flow, which is the blockchain for open worlds. We have a whole bunch of questions today that people have shared, so thank you for that. But before we get started, Layne and Mickey, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Would love to. Thanks so much for the introduction, Andrew. Hi, folks. I'm Layne, the product lead for Flow. Have been with, I've been had the crypto bug for a very long time. Started working with Dapper Labs and Axiom Zen back in 2017, sort of at the height of all of the crypto excitement. A couple months after that, we launched CryptoKitties, and the rest is sort of history. But I've spent the better part of the last 2 years building out the Flow protocol with the team of about 30 of us that are there now. And yeah, it's been quite the ride. So thank you so much for having us.
Mickey, what's your story?
Oh, my story is much longer than Layne because of the age. I am head of partnerships here at Flow. I've been with the company Dapper Labs for about 2.5 years. Most of my adult career has been in gaming or tangential to gaming, so I'm somewhat of a gaming expert. And partnerships at Flow really means I would break it down into 3 levels or 3 layers of the blockchain. So I'm handling everything from our node validator partnerships to what I would call the middle layer, which encompasses analytics, payments, wallets, tools, etc. And then the developer layer, everything from certain IP partners to third-party game developers to DeFi developers and so on and so forth. So my role is somewhat all-encompassing on the partnership side.
Got it. Sounds good. Well, I want to jump in with a question which kind of goes right into a specific example to try to make things tangible or real for folks. And so I have a question about NBA Top Shot. And the question is why do you think the team behind it decided to build on Flow, or why they decided to build on a blockchain at all? What are the real benefits for the team? And then my follow-up is, what are the benefits for the users of the application?
Yeah, look, I think the NBA and the NBA Players Association chose Dapper Labs. Dapper Labs is a known commodity in the space. IP holders are impressed with the corporate knowledge of the blockchain and the collectible space on the blockchain. They're always impressed with us being pioneers, building CryptoKitties, and really the company knowledge that CryptoKitties has built into the organization. I would say that it was first choosing Dapper Labs, and then it was on us to talk to them about the benefits of Flow and why Flow. And really what they've bought into on Flow is the reasons that we built Flow in the first place. If you are the NBA and you have billions of global fans, you want to be able to service in any experience that you're doing as many of those as possible. And as we learned firsthand on Ethereum with CryptoKitties, servicing any decent subset of that fan base would have been impossible, both from the throughput or scalability side of things to the UX UI, right? You know, we're targeting NBA fans here with this NBA experience, and those fans, just your normal everyday NBA fan, we're probably not going to make it through your traditional DApp onboarding experience on Ethereum. And even if they did, how many of them that blockchain was able to support is a real question. We maxed out Ethereum with CryptoKitties at 10, 20,000 users. So if we're talking about billions of fans in any subset of that, it could have gotten pretty ugly pretty quick on Ethereum.
Why do you think that did they sort of start with blockchain, or did they start with your company and you told them about blockchain? What made them decide to build at all on blockchain versus just using a regular web app?
Well, I think that there are believers in a lot of these brands and large IP holders of this blockchain initiative, and it's an additional revenue stream. It's a new way to engage with customers. It's unlocking what they traditionally do in an analog world and the digital world, especially sports leagues. They understand collectibles in IP licensing in the analog world very, very well. And the NBA is just very, very forward thinking in what's coming next. And they're big believers in the NFT space, in the DApp space like we are. So they wanted to work with one of the most respected companies in the space, and hence that's why they're working with us.
Okay, and then the follow-up question is for the people that use the app, and it seems like people are using Top Shot, which is great. I get all the newsletters and emails, and I'm in the Discord, and it's been a really fun experience so far. What do you think the benefits for users are of choosing Flow?
I think Layne can answer that one really well.
Yeah.
So it comes back to exactly what Mickey said, where this was a really new opportunity for folks to engage. Like the Players Association got quite excited about it, because this is a chance for players and their fans to connect really closely, to really have that one-to-one experience, kind of like, you know, in the analog world, what would be a signature on a jersey, we can start to create that in the digital world. And so even if you never have the resources or the time to go to a real basketball game, suddenly all of the assets and the experience of being at the physical game, where you have a souvenir to take home and you had a real moment with the players and the team, some of that starts to feel a lot more real. And Flow prioritizes two really important things around scale. So not only is it enough to support an audience as large as all of the NBA audience, but Flow prioritizes finality. So a quick certainty about what the state of your transaction is, which means that you know very quickly that the NBA Top Shot that moment is yours, and it's yours forever. And in addition, because Flow's architecture is designed to support a really large execution space without sharding or without having to divide that execution space, the ability for really large communities to be built here, and for the players and not just their North American fans, like it's not, we don't have to divide the communities. It can be their entire fan base connecting in a way that they wouldn't have normally. And so I think Flow offered to, we start thinking about network effects and how communities are built. Flow offers a really unique and unprecedented opportunity for a lot of folks to get in touch and to collaborate in these experiences. And then it also is fast, and people like fast.
Got it. Well, let's stick on user experience for a second. So we talked about Top Shot. There's going to be other applications that will launch in the future. From a user experience perspective, do I have a Flow account and then I see these other apps within it? Do I have different accounts for every app? What's the sort of user experience there?
Yeah, so you have a single Flow account, and we actually use something called the Flow Client Library. It's an opinionated use of one of our SDKs that basically means for any application you integrate with a single interface to have support for all of the various wallets. And as a wallet provider, you just integrate with a single service, and then any supported dApp will also be able to link out to your wallet. And so what everyone has in common is a Flow account or a Flow address. But the tool for accessing that address is something that can be integrated with any dApp, and can be, you can access that address from any wallet, and that's sort of up to the user's discretion. Got it.
Okay. How do you see sort of secondary markets evolving? If you use the metaphor of baseball card collector, one of the things you can do with them is sell them. Do you imagine that will take place within Flow? That'd be a third-party experience. How do you imagine that sort of evolving?
Yeah. Well, I think I want to back this up a little bit. I think this is one of the benefits, or why these IP holders are really, really interested in doing this. It's the true ownership aspect. It's the true ownership with verifiable scarcity, but it's also the supercharging or scaling of these P2P interactions or marketplaces. And from our perspective, I don't think Dapper Labs or Flow want to own a P2P marketplace necessarily. I think we want to leave it up to our community or other incumbents to come in and build those experiences on Flow. Flow's in an open blockchain where we're encouraging any and all third-party developers to come in and build these experiences on Flow and make a business out of it.
Okay, yeah. And then if I'm putting the pieces together, what you said before, Layne, it sounds like there will be a common API or even a set of standards. So building these kind of marketplaces might be easier than harder?
Yeah, definitely. Flow,
Yeah.
we really, the foundation of the product and the pillars it's built on really are the foundations of composability. What we saw with CryptoKitties was phenomenal growth around the product that we never would have had the time or the resources to make ourselves, and it made the community so rich. There were so many things that were built on top of CryptoKitties, accessories and additional games and all this stuff that we wouldn't have been able to have. And so everything from the client libraries that you use to the tooling to the way that we're structuring our own smart contracts are made to really further that promise that we've made and what we think is so important and interesting about blockchain technology, which is that, you know, just because we're the ones that create it doesn't mean that we're the ones that finish it. And we're going to start a really cool foundation for people to build on top of, but it absolutely shouldn't necessarily just be us that's adding that functionality. There's 2 programs going on right now, the Open World Builders program and the Alpha program. And both of them, we're seeing lots of folks from the community already starting to add things and taking a lot of interest in building peer-to-peer marketplaces. And we love that. Like we're just trying to encourage them to do that, because it's that is how we get equitable economic distribution. That's how we reduce the barriers to entry. That's how this ecosystem starts to look a lot different than what we have everywhere else. So yeah, it's something we spend a lot of time thinking about, and the client libraries and all of the tooling will definitely reflect that. So in terms of building modular things that are uniquely valuable, that's what we've optimized for.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
and our branding also reflects that. I mean, we are the blockchain for open world. So that essentially is what we're wanting to do. We want builders to come in and build those open worlds. Either they're building foundational smart contracts to enable composability, or they are the ones building on top of the existing smart contracts, participating composability. But we do want this to be a completely open world and an open environment for any builder or developer to come in and make cool stuff.
Okay, so building on that, we've talked already about sort of the use case of collectibles, or sort of these digitally scarce assets. What else do you see being built on Flow? Is there anything you want to see? Is there things you're seeing being built? You know, I'd be remiss if we didn't say the word DeFi in the crypto video. But what other use cases do you see? Do you think it's more than just collectibles, or is that really the laser focus for now?
That's definitely, crypto collectibles is an awesome place to start, because it's the kind of thing that you can get your hands on, you can explain. Like I have a pretty easy time explaining CryptoKitties and NBA Top Shots to my parents, and that's the bottom line is that's the phase the industry's in. We need things that we can talk about and share with our friends. But that is like peak of the iceberg. So NFTs and collectibles are a great way to sort of get that initial, they help people think about it, they help them put it in concrete terms. But when the question that you were asking about, you know, what do users look like in this world, and the account model is a really interesting component of Flow that helps to facilitate what trustless peer-to-peer marketplaces and networks can look like. And fundamentally, that's what we have with the blockchain, right? We have this infrastructure of payment technology where you can trustlessly interact with your peers in a way that's kind of unprecedented. And so that the combination of the account model that makes very intuitive and sort of native to the development experience, this idea that the user has value and they accrue value, and that you as a developer access that and give them services based on it, I think that's what's starting to really unlock what will be new business models. And that's what we've sort of been missing in the space. You know, we saw the ICO boom, and that was, you know, crowdfunding and everything that came out of that was important, but it wasn't sustainable. We still haven't really seen a super sustainable business model. And I hope what we're going to start to see is people building marketplaces and businesses and different products that really hone in and tap into this idea that we could change the value and reward mechanism and dynamic between companies and dApps and users, and that people will start to really really build out what those marketplaces look like. We saw sort of a wave of that with the sharing economy, Airbnb, Uber, you know, sort of the facilitation of exchange between two individuals. And I think we're going to see another wave of that to an even greater degree, where the payment infrastructure isn't, and the user data isn't the thing that the companies are competing on. It's the value of their service and what they're actually providing. So lots of cool stuff. But to strictly answer your question, crypto collectibles is certainly not where it stops, not at all. It's a really important starting point, I think. But we there's a lot to go in terms of developing business models, and DeFi will be, you need liquidity and you need a mechanism for value exchange. So I think it'll be a natural evolution of the ecosystem, but it's a means to an end. It's not the system itself. And I think that's something that we're trying to do a little bit differently.
Yeah, I can add, due to my gaming experience, I can add a little bit to this. That it was a great answer, Layne, but from a gaming perspective, the way I look at it is gaming, which is essentially what we're doing at Dapper Labs and what we're encouraging collectible developers or builders to do is create. CryptoKitties was successful not only because of the collectible nature of it, but because there was an engagement or gaming loop in it that drove users back every day, right? And anything that we do and we build as a company, or we advise on, the community building, these things should have these engagement mechanics. Whether you want to call them games or not is up to you, but there's this gaming aspects to them. But gaming has traditionally been an avenue for mass market adoption and mass market understanding of new technology. Just from the 13, 14 years I've been in gaming, you kind of saw it with Facebook, where Facebook has the social graph. They had these viral channels in the past when they were first getting started. This is kind of an abstract concept and hard for folks to understand. But it really started with zombie and werewolf type of apps, where you're sending like bytes from zombie and werewolves to your friends, and it was like a really easy way to understand this viral mechanic in the social graph. And that on Facebook kind of peaked with Farmville, where you're requesting friends to play with you, sending them gifts and all that. It got spammy over time, but it helped Facebook grow because it allowed users to experience the social graph. Same thing happened with your iPhone. The first ways people kind of experienced the touchscreen and the accelerometer and all these abstract concepts that we now take for granted in our smartphones were first experienced by users through gaming, or easily first experienced by users through gaming. I think the blockchain for mass market adoption probably will be no different. I think the path of mass adoption for Flow and for other blockchains is through these gaming and entertainment apps. So it's a great place to start. And then to where this is going, I don't know, but I think the great thing about having an open world concept is we're unlocking the creativity of the developer world, and who knows what comes out of that. I'm sure there'll be things way beyond DeFi, way beyond what we're conceiving here in this event or on this call. But that's why we want to make it easy for builders, and that's why we want to make it as open as possible, because that unlocks the creativity of the world.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the end user experience. I want to kind of focus in on what you just mentioned, which was the developer experience. At the start, Mickey, you mentioned that an entity like the NBA partners with Dapper Labs, and you take it from there. What does it look like for onboarding, the next 100 apps that come on board? What's involved? What kind of team do you need to launch an application on Flow? Is it just a technical team? Do you need other people? Like what? Let's say I want to have a startup that's focused on launching on Flow. What does that team look like?
Do you want this one, Mickey, or do you want me to jump in?
Well, I mean, there's probably a couple. There's probably the technical answer to this, and there's probably just the broad strokes overview. Look, we've got in our open world builders program, we've got one-person developer shops building interesting products on Flow. And as a company, we're helping bootstrap in a way with our advice and technical knowledge, and just being resources for these developers to build on Flow. So I think it kind of depends on the type of business. There are enterprise AAA game developers building experiences on Flow. Those are fully robust teams that are needed to build not only the blockchain aspect of it, but the overall game and the game mechanics and the game experience. but I think Flow is set up to support anyone from the hobbyist and single builder, whether that's us helping bootstrap them, developing the initial smart contract to kind of have their business take off, or it's the folks that we saw in what we call the Kittyverse on CryptoKitties. We had 40 or 50 different hobbyists or 1 or 2 person developer shops building all these cool experiences on top of the CryptoKitties smart contracts. So I think once the initial infrastructure of smart contracts is being built out, it could be anyone from a large organization to a hobbyist, and we're here to support that whole spectrum of developers.
Okay,
And
so it sounds like go ahead, Layne.
No, sorry. Yeah, so critically, the hobbyist doesn't need to be technical. That's something that we're really trying to think through. There's sort of, if there's 3 components to building a business, one's the actual product, one's the distribution of the thing, and then one's the sort of the value. There's like the technical product and the product, and the distribution. So the blockchain sort of manages the distribution, and so you find yourself with a little less need for maybe a marketing team, but where we're really falling short in the industry right now is we have a lot of technical product folks that quickly divert themselves to building tools for themselves, which is a real shame because it's great talent that can't help but solve their own problems first. And I think we've seen that in the industry in a couple times, and Flow's no exception. But having more non-technical folks who, like we coin them creators, just people who like putting stuff out into the world, and maybe they're musicians, maybe they're artists, maybe they're poets or they're journalists or gamers. Any of those people should be able to come here and put that thing out into the world and have all the infrastructure that Mickey's alluding to around, listing it on one of the many marketplaces, using the existing on-ramps and account management solution that I alluded to. So really it's, blockchain makes accessible not just the like technical infrastructure, but also the business infrastructure of making these products possible. And so hopefully it'll be the case that a single person can come with an idea and they can ship it to people in the course of an afternoon. And there's a couple of folks that we've already seen starting to do that and pull on that thread. And that's really the direction that we're trying to trend in.
Okay, so let's go down one level more technical and say, I want to make an app. I'm a developer. I sit down. What am I doing? Am I coding a smart contract? What language is it in? How do I deploy it? Do I need to run a node? Can you kind of walk me through a simple hello world, what it looks like, what kind of technology I interact with along the way?
Absolutely. So yeah, the first thing you're doing is almost certainly writing a smart contract. Smart contracts in Flow are written in Cadence, and Cadence is a language that we wrote ourselves. It's based on really similar intuitions that the Libra team working on the Move VM had. And so that's all resource-oriented programming. We can come back to that in a second, but you're writing it in Cadence. And there's something called the Flow Playground, and that'll give you 4 different tutorials. So one is literally Hello World, to just sort of give you a sense of the structure of Cadence. There's a fungible token, a non-fungible token, and a marketplace example in there if you want to create your own token, your own asset, or a way to tie those things together. Hey, Monique, I know you. Monique can tell you all about it. She went through it. And I think they used the NFT example even. A fellow open world builder participant. So so you're writing your smart contract. You're writing the smart contract in the playground. And, at first you're just sort of, it's just a really basic, very light web ID basically that sort of gives you a sense of the structure of Cadence. Once you've had a chance to do that, you can spin up what we call the emulator. And the emulator is a development tool that's sort of like a dummy version of the blockchain. It goes through all the motions, but it's stubbing out those processes, and you can easily run it locally to run your contract or any of the transactions against it to see, are things behaving the way that you'd expect. And then once you get a little further, there's the VS Code extension, which is a more integrated development environment hooked up directly to the emulator for like the more fulsome development. Folks have been able to develop entire applications with that. And then you don't need to start running a node. You can submit your everything directly to what we call an access node. And access nodes act as just a proxy to the network. So there's 4 different node types. The collection nodes are the ones that take transactions in. But if you don't want to deal with managing messages between collection and verification nodes, then you just talk to an access node, or you run your own, and it handles all of the transaction submission. And like receipt retrieval or events of remission from the chain. And so, yeah, you sort of start with the playground, then you go to the VS Code extension with the emulator, keep building, you submit it to and the testnet access node first. Obviously, you sort of play around with it on testnet, and then you go ahead and submit it right now to us for review to make sure that user safety is kept, because obviously this is all still early development stages. And then we help you deploy it to Mainnet, but none of that requires you to run a node. We really want it to be, accessibility is, and low barrier to entry is the name of the game in blockchain. And so if you want to run a node, you're welcome to, but really you can do basically all of this development entirely locally, and then you can just submit that to an access node. So it's really lightweight. And there's some great documentation that us and the community have put together in docsonflow.org, which we can share with anyone who's interested. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I didn't know about the VS Code extension and the emulator. That's all really cool stuff. It seems to be addressing a lot of the potential pitfalls that we see with other chains. You mentioned something I kind of want to zoom in on, which was, it sounds like in the beginning, part of these steps are to sort of work with the team to submit your app for approval. Do you imagine an app store model in the future? Is it open in the future? How does that evolve over time?
Well, it's definitely open in the future. We're just building out a testing framework that's more, but we're trying to build out a more robust testing framework. And once that exists and the community can make really good use of it and they have great confidence and conviction in their own contracts, then it'll be totally public and folks will deploy everything on their own. It's just the, Cadence has sort of been in development for about 1.5 years at this point, and it's still early. And so we just want to make sure that there are real users spending real money on Flow, and it's sort of, it's a little different that way. Usually you launch Mainnet and then you get users later. So we just have to be really conscious that on Mainnet, the stuff folks are interacting with is safe. And so until we have that more robust testing framework, we're helping folks review their contracts and then and submitting them. But in the future, yeah, you wouldn't need anything from us. You just go ahead and submit it. And we're probably about 3 to 6 months away from that, I would say.
Okay, that makes sense. So far we've talked about a couple different types of people that might interact with Flow. There's the app developers, there's the users. We talked about the experience of both those. Who else is involved in Flow? I know there's things at the protocol level. There's a token. Who else would be involved? What are the other parties that are participating in this ecosystem?
Yeah, so we sort of think of them as four different folks. There's the players, the people who are doing stuff, who are just having a good time. The creators, so these are the folks that not strictly developers, just people who are putting stuff out into the world, and we try to keep the definition of that really broad, because I think what the space needs more of is a broader definition of what it means to build something. It's not just about writing code always. And then the third group of folks, node operators, so the folks who are securing the protocol, and they are they're a pretty significant group of folks that are running each of the 4 different node types, of which we're very happy Figment is one. And then the fourth group of folks that Vicky, who am I missing?
Who's tools
or staking?
Yeah.
Token holders?
Oh, sorry, I consider that in node. Well, you could, yeah. So the at some point there will probably be a whole separate persona of people who have tokens and just are trying to figure out what they're meant to do with tokens. But we really try to, the Flow token doesn't represent an asset to be speculated on. It represents an asset to use the network. That's, like, we feel very strongly about that. And so we really try to help folks pick one of the 3 buckets that I mentioned of, like, do you want to play here? Do you want to build here? Do you want to participate here? And if none of those things are for you, that's fine, but you should be coming here because there's a real thing that you want to do. And so of course there'll be folks that are just holding tokens, but hopefully they're sort of in an interim stage where they're trying to figure out what they want to do next, and maybe there's an experience for them yet, but there will be. Okay.
Yeah, let's spend a little bit of time on the token, just to get a clear idea of you mentioned, the design goal of it. But when I first logged into Top Shot, I could pay with a credit card. Do you imagine in the future I pay with the Flow token, or what are the use cases for Flow token, and how do people make use of it?
Yeah, the Flow token is the native asset of the protocol. It's kind of unique in that it, unlike on Ethereum where ERC20 and ETH are 2 separate types of thing. The flow token corresponds to the fungible token definition as any other token on the network does. So it's used for the payment of fees. It's used for the creation of accounts. It's used to incentivize all of it's what rewards are paid out to the node operators. And it's also the token that we use to back the creation of secondary tokens to ensure that any secondary token markets have a base level of, you're paying for security in the asset that people are using to secure the network. And so it's really important that secondary assets as they're created there's still enough value locked in to represent the security of those assets. And so it's also the sort of the backing asset for any secondary tokens that folks would want to mint. And yeah, so it's used for absolutely anything, but in the short term, we do still have very practical considerations around who is going to have this token. It's still very early days, and so credit card on-ramps, as you identified, are something that we wanted to make sure were front and foremost, because it really shouldn't be the case that, back to the point of use, people should be here to use stuff, not to figure out the inner workings of why they would get a token that a node operator is paid for mining a chain, staking a chain with proof of stake. And so, it is used for everything, and it can be used for all of the operations on the network, but credit card on-ramps are a really important component of bringing mainstream audiences to Flow. That the mental barrier of a credit card is a lot lower than the mental barrier of figuring out what a private key is. So that was why you saw credit card on-ramps on Flow, and it's something that we're trying to make accessible to all of the dApps in the ecosystem, because we're finding it really helps with user acquisition.
Do you imagine that the idea of a transaction fee will be a user-facing concept? Will users know about paying for transactions? To try to make an analogy, when I swipe my credit card, I don't know that the business is paying a transaction fee on the back end. Will users have to know about transaction fees and pay for them? Will the apps pay for them? Will there be a different model? How do you imagine that these fees get paid?
So glad you asked. Yeah, no, this was one of the core problems that we found with, anyone who's built on Ethereum knows there's a lot of time and effort spent trying to find ways for users not to pay transaction fees. And so the transaction model on Flow quite literally is that there's just 3 different signatures. There's an author signature, a proposer signature, and what we call the payer signature. And so I won't go into the other 2 right now, but the basically any account with Flow in it can sign as the payer without having any authority over the assets of the account. So if you were buying an NBA Top Shot and you didn't have, you're paying with credit card and you wanted me to be paying your transaction fee, you would just request Layne's address as the payer, and I would sign that because I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to play. And really that's managed at the wallet or user agent level. So the user agent in most cases will just sign that on the user's behalf or the dApp that they're playing with. But critically to your point, there's really no need for a user to ever see that the payer signature field. That could always just be populated by the person who's paying it on their behalf, and that person paying it doesn't need to have any other kind of authority over the account.
Okay, you mentioned go ahead.
Yeah, I'll expand on it just a bit. So the idea too is that the equivalent transaction fee or gas fee on Flow is much in magnitudes less than it is on Ethereum. And the idea there is that the fees will be made up for node operators in scale, right? So we've built a blockchain for the mass market. We should be able to scale and reach a much wider audience. Therefore, the scale will make up for the fees. Because the fees are so low, it should be a financially attractive decision for the developer to pay the fees on behalf of the user to increase engagement and make it up on the back end of revenue and participation of their user base from coming into this free-to-play experience. It's similar to the concept of free-to-play gaming, where you play a game for X amount of time for free, but then those users will engage in transactions. And you've seen over time in the growth of free-to-play gaming where the revenue model for those games is a much more attractive revenue model than, say, your traditional pay upfront or big box fee for buying a game. The free-to-play games because they're engaging the user first, they're getting the user hooked on the experience, they're able to generate far more revenue from that user than a traditional game would if they're requiring the user to buy it up front.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. You mentioned, we've talked about Ethereum a couple times and some compare and contrast. Do you imagine that some Ethereum dApps will migrate or move over? Are you more focused from a partnership perspective on new things that have never been built before? A little bit of both. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I don't have to imagine, because the reality is that we already have some Ethereum dApps moving over, and we're supporting them in the ways that we can. But I think in general, for this space to move forward, we have to expand the pie. And our target isn't going to Ethereum and convincing those dApps to move over. If those dApp developers and those developers on Ethereum look at Flow and decide Flow is a better place for their experience, we're happy to support them. But we're looking forward. We're looking at how do we bring in the next wave or the next generation of experiences that take on what you've seen being built on Ethereum to the next level and build those next experiences on Flow. And that's both from us internally as Dapper Labs, signing these world-class IP partners like the NBA, and building those first experiences to show our developer community what is possible. But then what we hope to happen is our developer community take those learnings and take what we've showed them and build upon that and create even better, more engaging, more experiences that I would call are the next level from what you're seeing today.
Okay, so let's play a little game where I have a dApp on Ethereum. I've written my smart contracts in Solidity. What's the process look like for me getting moved over? I assume that user migration probably won't be a part of it, but technically, or what are the sort of steps I need to think through if I do want to make a transition?
Very similar to starting over, unfortunately, but the it's you sort of you take a look at your smart contract and connect with the Flow team, and we sort of help you workshop what it would look like in Cadence. In most cases, especially folks who've written Solidity, find Cadence is sorry, I didn't go into this in great detail, but Cadence is a resource-oriented programming language that just tries to make really explicit the idea of programming with value. When we call them resources, and those are sort of things like CryptoKitties, and those integers are different in that they need to be moved and not copied. It's important that value is, you move all of it or none of it, and it goes all the way to the person you're meant to deposit it to, not half of the way. And so the Cadence really is it's designed around this idea that when you're programming with value, there's different sort of rules and things you need to think about, and that can be quite stressful for developers. And so typically what we've found is folks who've written a smart contract before find it's a lot more intuitive to write in Cadence, and so that's not a huge lift. And from our time with CryptoKitties and continuing to build out the CryptoKitties ecosystem, we're spending a lot of time thinking about what it looks like for folks to move between Ethereum and Flow, and those are conversations we're really happy to have with folks who are also trying to. I don't necessarily think moving users or assets over is completely out of the question, but it's certainly it has to come down to what's the best for users. Will they have a 10x better experience on Flow? Awesome, then let's move them. If they won't, then it's not. There are lots of CryptoKitties users on Ethereum who will probably forever stay on Ethereum, and that's great. We're happy that that's where they want to be. But the process basically is starting from scratch in the sense that you're writing a new smart contract.
So one thing that I've seen in Ethereum is auditing. In the marketing round, I've had my contract audited is a big thing. Do you think that a similar process or similar sort of little industry will pop up around Flow? Is auditing important for your smart contracts on Flow?
We've really tried to internalize the safety, security, readability elements of Cadence right in the way the programming language works. So there's there's some features like pre and post conditions where you can see exactly what the outcome of your transaction or your contract will be before you send it. And just having those innate tools native to the language, I think, makes it a lot more straightforward and it gives a developer a lot more confidence that they haven't missed anything. So, you know, if you want additional, if you want additional feedback and certainty, or maybe there's a legal reason at some point that folks might do audits. But I think in terms of doing an audit for your own, like we always did audits of our Solidity contracts because we just weren't sure. There were just times when we were like, we're going to miss something because this is pretty complicated. And so what we're really trying to do with Cadence is make it so that no one has that feeling. No one feels like they can't do it themselves, like they're going to lose anyone's money by accident. And so, you know, hopefully 95% of folks don't have to carry the cost, because it's a pretty big cost to do that audit. So hopefully 95% of folks don't need to. They can just ship an application and they can have really great certainty about the safety of assets and funds for their users, just with the native features of Cadence.
Got it. Okay, so here's a question from the audience. It's about Web 2 developers. How is Flow thinking about attracting Web 2 developers? How do you describe sort of the value props of Flow? How do you convince them to even try building on a blockchain?
Yeah, well, I would say, who are the current Web 3 developers, right? Aren't they former Web 2 developers, most of them? I think that trend will continue. I think as we can prove out different business models, let's call it gaming. Let's use gaming, for example. Yep. There are a subset of the game development community that is looking actively at the next platform. The winners on mobile have kind of been formed and it's known. There's a group of thousands of game developers, some that are already in blockchain, building games on blockchain. But there are thousands of game developers looking for a home or a platform where they can become pioneers, where they can become first movers and build from the ground up on a new platform, taking their business to the next step, right? What needs to happen there is there needs to be more proof from a game developer experience of scalability, right? A game developer isn't necessarily going to go to a platform where they can only attract 10, 20,000 users at a time because of scalability issues. That's just not in a game developer's DNA. But as these business models, as these platforms prove that they can support these types of business models, you'll see more and more of those traditional developers come and build on top of the platform. And I think that kind of goes across all different types of business models outside of gaming as well. As we continue to prove out business models and that they are achievable on Flow, you will see those developers flock in, trying to be the early movers or the pioneers of this technology. Yep,
that makes sense. I have a question related to sort of attracting users. You mentioned Facebook earlier in sort of the arc of the Facebook platform and games on Facebook, and that really didn't. I don't think that turned out how the game developers wanted. And Mickey, you probably know a lot better than me. And so I'm curious of what have you learned from that? What are you going to try to, what's the pitch for someone who sort of got burned on that game developer, and how you tell them what's different?
Well, look, it turned out really, really well for a lot of game developers. A lot of, Zynga is all Facebook. They're a public company, multi-billion-dollar public company. There was a number of billion-dollar companies made in Facebook games. But what happened, and this is a very good segue to what we're doing, is this is the centralization problem. Facebook just felt like one day, after all of these companies raised venture capitalist funds, formed companies, employed people, to just shut off what made building games interesting on Facebook. Just overnight, bam, done. And all those businesses had to find another home. Thankfully for them, mobile was just kind of, smartphone gaming was just kind of coming up. So there was a seamless home. But that's not the point. The point here is that we're on this Flow in the blockchain is a decentralized ecosystem with no central authority. So what you would have to worry about with Facebook back in 2010, 2011, you do not have to worry about on Flow. You do not have to worry about on a blockchain, because there's no one controlling it and there's no one that can shut off the pipe overnight to kind of kill your business. So I think that's why this decentralized technology is attractive and will become more and more attractive to those types of developers, because they have been burned. and they would love to find a platform where it's impossible or not feasible to be burned like that.
Yep, that makes sense. And you mentioned business models as well. I'm thinking back to the Facebook days, and there was a lot of experiments with business models. Everything, from credits to micropayments didn't really work. But what business models are you seeing people building on Flow attempting? Do you have to have your own native token? Can you do a cut of a transaction? Like, what are you seeing the early business models that people are trying?
You definitely don't need your own native token. We really encourage people to use, the network effects of the currency are all the places it's accepted. And so we feel pretty, our strong recommendation is use the currency everyone else is using, because then your users have access to, that they're going to be sticky. You don't have to keep them busy. Someone else will keep them busy and they'll still come back to you. So you definitely don't need your own currency all over the place. We're pretty big proponents of single native token use. But to be honest, and now I'm going to maybe jump ahead, but the thing that what do I really want to see people build is things that play with new business models, because we haven't seen it yet. We sort of, when we launched CryptoKitties, the notion of a descending auction was sort of a mental model that everyone tied to NFT issuance. And the reasons that the descending auction was the way it was basically just because we needed people to be able to put in a price that was going to be only lower by the time their transaction succeeded. And so it was a very practical Ethereum consideration for developing that descending auction model. But now it's sort of canonical in the industry. Everyone uses it. And it's sort of a blessing and a curse. Like we made a design decision that everyone's using, and it was great in a lot of ways, but it also means that we're not quite seeing, I feel like we could really push the boundaries of business models more, especially around that native ability to facilitate transactions between two people really easily, where one person has the data and about what the thing is, and the other person has sort of a query about that, and they get to meet in the middle and exchange value. So folks are starting to think about that. I've been getting some really interesting pitches about different reward and incentive mechanisms and ways of changing the content creation and validation ecosystem. So everything from verifiable photos and content to even just like, NBA Top Shots and game assets that you're adding. There's sort of some business models around adding value to existing NFTs. So it's not just the NFT that's minted, it's also the value of adding like a signature to the NBA Top Shot moment, which is something folks are working on, an autograph. And that's a business model in itself. You have this value add ecosystem, but there's still a lot of work to be done there. We're seeing like early inklings of things, but there's still, I think we could push it a lot farther and come up with some really cool stuff.
That makes sense. So I want to talk a little bit about Mainnet and sort of the road to Mainnet. It seems like there's a lot of things that have to happen. It seems like there might already be a Mainnet. So how would you describe the status of Mainnet, and what needs to happen before it's fully open and you can say, yes, this is a Mainnet with no asterisk?
Yeah, so Mainnet, we call it in beta right now. Mainnet's in beta, meaning that the state that's on it right now is completely, it's canonical. It will be preserved forever. The NBA Top Shots and other assets that have been built or moved around on Flow, they will exist forever and they will always belong to those people. Mainnet without an asterisk or not in beta is Mainnet that has the native staking functionality implemented. So right now, all of our validators we were prioritizing and optimizing for people being able to use the thing. And we have multiple external operators, including yourselves, but it's time to get more of the Flow tokens out into the ecosystem and liquid now that the protocol has been tested. It's been running in beta for about 6 months now. And so we feel pretty confident in its ability to stay standing and preserve user state for a long time. And so later this month, we're going to be turning on real staking. So real Flow tokens used for staking, real rewards that'll be liquid for people to use in the ecosystem. And from a user perspective, nothing changes really. The experiences are all still usable. Credit card on-ramps are still an option. But from a developer perspective and from a node operator perspective, now there's this native token that they have access to, and all of the opportunities that creates. So it's beta mainnet is going to be full mainnet end of this month, and excited to share that with y'all. But it's it's really just the difference of having that Flow token circulating. The technical functionality has been there for a long time, and now we feel good about sharing it with everybody and having them transact real value on it.
Yeah. Okay, and then from a sort of partnership perspective, what should we look for coming down the pipe, Mickey? Are there other apps announced? Are there things I should be watching for?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is this is kind of threefold. One is the IPs and experiences leveraging these IPs coming out of the Dapper studio. There are a number of those. You know about NBA. We announced Dr. Seuss. We announced UFC. That's probably half of them that Dapper is going to be building. So there are other very exciting ones that we'll be announcing soon. There are a number of third-party developers ready or close to ready to pushing out live. There's a company called B-Side Games that's going to launch a Steam game. Chain Monsters using Flow. He's basically ready when we are. And there's a number of other third parties, game developers or collectible developers about ready to go live. We have a number of third-party marketplaces building on Flow currently. The timeline for those going live varies depending on who we're talking about, but you'll be seeing those marketplaces. We've integrated both the Magic wallet, used to be Fortmatic, it's Magic, and the Portal wallet into FCL for use for anyone on Flow. Analytics providers like Flipside Analytics. We have a block explorer that's about ready to go out. And just a number of tools that are being built or are already built and ready to go live when we go live. So there's a ton of activity, a ton of stuff. We have the Open World Builders program, which how many applicants did we have to that, Layne? There was a lot.
60, and there's about 12 folks that of which Monique, who's on this call, is one, who successfully completed Open World Builders and came up with some really compelling first applications. And so those teams we're doing cohort workshops with them to get their products over the line. But there's some really cool stuff coming from the community, and a lot of the folks in the community have built on other chains before, or on maybe had a background with Ethereum, and then we're sort of waiting for the next step function improvement in blockchain development, and they feel like they've found it on Flow. And so they're putting out either similar experiences to what they had on other chains that they've been working on for a while, or in some cases they've been inspired by some of the functionality of Cadence and the account model to come up with wholly new things. So there's a really good mix of the IP partners that Mickey works with and community projects.
Yeah, and then folks like Animoca, we've announced they're building a couple of their experiences on Flow, and there are at least two other AAA enterprise well-known game developers currently building on Flow, but those are always more long-term because they're more robust, in-depth experiences that take longer, but they are building their smart contracts and cadence and anticipating launching on Flow in the coming months.
Okay. The last question I always like to ask is the magic wand question. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and you could have something happen to Flow, what would it be? I think, Layne, you already said one, which was you want to see an innovation in business models. Does anything else come to mind, or are you going to stick with that one?
I can make that one a tiny bit more specific. So
okay.
I think one of the products that would be really cool to see people really tying the intrinsic value of a person to their actions and then rewarding them for it would be advertising. Like if there wasn't a better way where we didn't corrupt the world and humans, and brands were still able to share their value and share that specifically with the people who are talking about that value, I think that would be really cool. So if anyone ever ends up hearing this and wants to talk about how to change the relationship between brands and users on Flow, I would love to hear it, because I think that's going to be a pretty interesting problem to solve.
I think that's too big of an opportunity for someone not to do. Someone's going to do that.
Yeah, I can't wait. I've talked to a couple folks about it, but it's very yeah, it's still early. There's a lot of there will be a lot of really hard product thinking to be done there. And so on one hand, I really just want to solve it. On the other hand, a magic wand would be nice because I could use a vacation.
That's the point of the question. Mickey, magic wand to you.
I'm going to go down the open worlds track here. Look, we are a blockchain for open worlds. I want to see a really, really cool open world. I could see someone like Lego building an amazing open world on Flow, or even you know, if Roblox or Minecraft wanted to come over to Flow. I think like just building those core experiences and allowing the smart contracts to be open for composability for the Flow community to build mods or additional experiences on top of those open worlds, I think would be a fantastic thing to happen to Flow. And the Flow users, you know, not just Flow, but users that can develop and experience those experiences.
Yep, great. Well, I love both those answers. So to wrap up, there's a lot coming down the pipe. It seems that we got Mainnet. There's more apps launching. How should people keep up with things? Where should they be looking?
We do have a newsletter that's on flow.org that you can sign up for. Most of the conversation happens in Discord, so folks are welcome to join us there. There's lots of folks in the community, really great conversation. There's also the forum.onflow.org. Yeah, all three of those are great options.
Okay.
Twitter, I guess
good.
maybe I'm probably supposed to say Twitter. I'm like an anti-social media. So
Yeah,
I forgot about Twitter. We do have Twitter.
I get most of my Flow information from the Flow Twitter account. So
there you go. There's multiple sources. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, very good. All right. So any other things you guys want to share before we sign off for the day?
Well, Ron just asked a great question. I'm not sure where you got the idea that we were going to facilitate control over one's own DNA. I don't know anything about that, but would love to hear about it. So no news on the Flow front.
Very good. Mickey, anything else you want to share before we sign off?
You know, I mean, just that, you know, we've spent a long time building Flow. A lot of work and thought has gone into it, most of which is our own experience building so many experiences from CryptoKitties to the Dapper Wallet to Cheese Wizards and more on top of Ethereum that has formulated where we've gone with this project. And it's a couple years in the making, so it's just really, really awesome to finally be live and getting Mainnet out there to see what everyone comes up with, what everyone builds on top of Flow, including Ron's DNA project. That sounds pretty interesting.
Very good. Well, thanks for your time. I learned a lot, and it made me more excited about what's coming next. So thanks again.
Thanks so much for having us, Andrew. It was a real pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Figment team.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.